day, ma'am. Good day, everyone. My name is BEB'S AWAYAN, second year Bachelor of Science Criminology in Hingaog City Colleges. And for today, I will be reporting the topic about classical theories of crime causation. Quotes of the day. Don't let what you cannot do interfere with what you can do. So, classical theories of crime causation. This is scientific methods to study the nature, extent, cause, and control of crimes. In this context, the topic at hand intends to cover one of the four aspects of the criminological studies, that is the causes of crime. So, let's proceed to rational choice theory. Rational choice theory refers to a set of guidelines that help understand economic and social behavior. The theory postulates that an individual will perform a cost-benefit analysis to determine whether an option is the right for them. A good example of the rational choice theory is white-collar crime. The white-collar criminal premeditated the waging and options of his or her choice, decides the personal benefit of stealing money outweighs any chance of her or his thief drifting discovered. So, persons involved here is philosopher Adam Smith, and is considered the originator of rational choice theory. His essay, An Inquiry into the Nature and Causes of the Wealth of Nations from 1776, proposed human nature's tendency toward self-interest resulted in prosperity. Second is routine activity theory. This theory is based on the assumption that crime can be committed by anyone who has the opportunity. The theory also states that victims are given choices on whether to be victims, mainly by not placing themselves in situations where a crime can be committed against them. For example, if an offender is motivated to commit crime, he or she might not do it if there are many people around. So, these people act as guardians simply by being present because they might act when they see a crime happening. On the other hand, of course, if guardians are absent, a crime is more likely to occur. So, the persons involved here is routine activity theory, first formulated by Lawrence E. Cohen and Marcus Felson by 1976, and later developed by Felson, is one of the most widely cited and influential theoretical constructs in the field of criminology and in crime science more broadly. So next is the lifestyle theory. The lifestyle theory is the idea that individuals have a high risk of becoming a crime victims if their patterns of behavior expose them to victimization. The most important of the premises are the crime control model helps to capture and punish criminals. So, for example, walking alone at night in the dangerous area, conspicuously wearing expensive jewelry, leaving doors unlocked, and associating with known criminals are other lifestyle characters that may lead to victimization. So, the persons involved here is the theory criminology created by Glenn Walters in 1990. And surprisingly, this theory is just a name would suggest a lifestyle choice to be a criminal. This theory focuses heavily in the biological factors that influence a person's ability to commit a crime. So, let's proceed to D, general deterrence and specific deterrence theory. General deterrence can be defined as the impact of the threat of legal punishment on the public at large. Specific deterrence can be seen as the impact of the actual legal punishment on those who are apprehended. So, for example, specific deterrence dictates that if an armed robber receives a harsh sentence of 8 years in prison, he will be less likely to commit armed robbery again when he eventually gets out. However, research has shown that effectiveness of the specific deterrence varies on a case-by-case basis. General deterrence set an example for society at large, whereas specific deterrence focuses only and the individual being punished. So, the persons involved here is Jeremy Bentham, who is known as the founder of this theory, a hedonistic conceptions of man that as such would be deterred from crime if punishment were applied swiftly, certainly, and severely. Cesare Beccaria, as the father of deterrence theory, juveniles around the United States are committing crimes every day. When they commit these crimes, they may not know of the consequence that come with committing a crime until they get caught. So, next is victim precipitation theory. The victim precipitation theory suggests that the characteristics of the victim precipitate the crime. That is, a criminal could single out a victim because the victim is of a certain ethnicity, race, sexual orientation, gender, or gender identity. So, under this theory, the victim is viewed an active participant in the crime. This happens in two ways. First, is the victim as participant in a crime who acts first, and second, the victim encourages, provokes the offender to commit a crime. These are the primary components of the victim precipitation theory. So the person involved here is L.E. Cohen and Felson, now on 1979. So F, incapacitation theory. The theory of incapacitation assumes that the state has a duty to protect the public from future wrongs or harms, and such protection can be afforded through some of incarceration or incapacitation. Incapacitation used to reduce crime by literally preventing some from committing crime through direct control during the incarceration experience. While it is not possible to commit a crime in presence, the possibility is greatly limited by the direct control exerted by the correctional system. So, example of incapacitation are incarceration, house arrest, or execution pursuant to the death penalty. So, the persons involved here is Zimring, F.A., and Hawkins, G., on 1995. So, let's proceed to next topic, number 2, psychological theories of crime causation. This entry focuses on the three major sociological theories of crime and delinquency: strain, social learning, and control theories. Most theories assume the following. First is there are consistent individuals' differences in an underlying construct, such as criminal potential or antisocial personality. Second is Hinduism or pursuit the pleasure are the main emerging factors. 3 is there is internal exhibition of the offending through the conscience or some similar. So, for example, Rory has been diagnosed with a personality disorder, which means that he feels less empathy than other people, and all of these psychological factors could have an effect on some like Rory, who then ends up a criminal. Yeah. So the persons involved here, the most important personality factors in relation to a crime is impulsiveness, while the most influential theory of the link between personality and crime is that put forward by Hans Eysenck. A significant theory focusing on impulsiveness was propounded by James Q. Wilson and Richard Herrnstein. Psychodynamic theory and psychosexual stages of human development. Freud proposed the personality development in childhood takes place during 5 psychosexual stages, which are the oral, anal, phallic, latency, and genetical stages during its stage. Sexual energy is expressed in different ways and through different parts of the body. The psychosexual energy or libido was described as the driving force behind behavior. Right? So, the persons involved here is Sigmund Freud's behavioral theory. So, behavioral theory seeks to explain human behavior by analyzing the antecedents and consequences present in the individual's environment and the learned association he or she has acquired through previous experience. So the persons involved here is John B. Watson. So next, let's proceed to social learning theory. Social learning theory suggests that social behavior is learned by observing and imitating the behavior of others. Psychologist Albert Bandura developed the social learning theory as an alternative to the earlier work of fellow psychologist B.F. Skinner, known for his influence behaviorism. Social learning theory emphasizes the importance of observing, modeling, and imitating the behaviors, attitudes, and emotions, reactions of others. Social learning theory also considers how both environment and cognitive factors interact to influence human learning and behavior. So, the persons involved here is it was proposed by Albert Bandura. So let's proceed to cognitive theory. So when we say cognitive theories, these are also characterized by their focus on the idea that how and what people think leads to the arousal of emotions, and that certain thoughts and beliefs lead to the disturbed emotion and behaviors, and others lead to healthy emotion and adaptive behavior. Cognitive theory is an approach to psychology that attempts to explain human behavior by understanding your thought processes. First, for example, a therapist is using principles of cognitive theory when they teach you how to identify maladaptive thought patterns and transform them into a constructive one. So, the persons involved here is Jean Piaget. Moral development theory. Kohlberg's theory of moral development is a theory that focuses on how children develop morality and moral reasoning. Kohlberg's also theory suggests that moral development occurs in a series of 6 stages. The theory also suggests that moral logic is primarily focused on seeking and maintaining justice. So, for example, here is young children will say that when trying to reach the forbidden cookie jar, breaking 10 cups is worse than breaking one. They also recognize the sanctity of rules. He also believed that children develop moral reasoning quickly and at an early age. So, that was focused on Lawrence Kohlberg's theory. Enter rational transmission theory. In the social sciences, intergenerational transmission refers to a transfer of economic or social status across generations. This generational transfer occurs through a variety of means, including in the inheritance of occupational status, educational attainment, earnings, and wealth. When integrational transmission is strong, children turn out much like parents and social mobility is low. For example, parents' schooling choices may direct impact in children's decision to stay in school. Intergenerational transmission incorporates both casual and non-casual channels. So that was involved Bern Bengston. Alternative theory. It is a set of statements or principles devised to explain a group of facts or phenomena, especially one that has been repeatedly tested or widely accepted and can be used to make predictions about natural phenomena. Example here is the alternative theory that the brain is left unchained after the night sleep is unacceptable on its face. So for its part, the defense may present an alternative theory of the effects associated with the crime. So persons involved here is Fred Dretsky. So let's proceed to differential association reinforcement theory. The theory is combination of Skinnerism, behaviorism, social learning theory, and differential association theory created by Edwin Sutherland. The theory explains that criminal behavior is learned by the reinforcement we receive after committing deviant behavior. So persons involved here is differential association reinforcement theory was created in 1966 by Roland Akers and Robert Boyce. Eysenck's condition theory. Eysenck's theory argues strongly that biological predisposition towards certain personality traits combined with conditioning and socialization during childhood in order to create our personality. This interactionist approach may therefore be much more valid than either a biological or environmental theory alone. Eysenck's personality theory of 1967-1997 describes three broad personality factors. These are the extraversion, introversion, neuroticism, ego stability. Persons involved here is arousal will be analogous on warmth, inhibition, and analogous to moisture. This became an inspiration for Hans Eysenck's theory. Hans Eysenck was born in Germany on March 4, 1916. So let's proceed to integrated theory. So when we say integrated theories, so there are theories that combine the concepts and central propositions from two or more prior existing theories in a new single set of integrated concept and proposition. That most common from integration involves combining social control and social learning theories. So the best example here of this type of integration is Eliot's 1979 integrated theory, in which strain leads to weak conventional bonds and society, which in turn leads to association with deviant peer groups and thus deviance. Theoretical integrations is a process of joining ideas from two or more criminological theories into a single theoretical statement, often to provide a complete and accurate explanation of crime or delinquent behavior. So the persons involved here is Terence P. Thornberry and Delbert S. Eliot and Associates. So maternal deprivations and attachment theory. Ball-based maternal deprivation hypothesis suggests that continual disruption of the attachment between infant and primary caregiver could result in long-term cognitive, social, and emotional difficulties for that infant. Bowlby originally believed that the effects to be permanent and irreversible. Bowlby also identified four types of attachment style: secure, anxious, ambivalent, disorganized, and avoidant. So, attachment theory. Example: some who is secure may move through the stages fairly quickly or skip some altogether, while someone who is anxious and avoidant may get stuck on one of the stages. Sample of the maternal deprivation was 44 criminal teenagers accused of stealing. All thieves were interviewed for signs of affectiousness, psychopathy, characterized lack guilt about their actions, lack of empathy for their victims, and a lack of affection. So the persons involved here is John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth. 3. Sociological theories of crime causation. So this entry focuses on the three major sociological theories of crime and delinquency: strain, social learning, and control theories. It can briefly describe several other important theories of crime, these most of which present elaborations of three theories. So, social disorganization theory. So, social disorganization theory suggests that a person's residential location is more significant than the person's characteristic when predicting criminal activity, and juveniles living in this area acquire criminality by the culture's approval within the disadvantaged urban neighborhoods. So the persons involved is Clifford Shaw and Henry Mackay. So concentric zone theory. The theory possessed concentric zones around the central area defined by their residential composition, moving from the very poor and socially deviant and inner zone of transition to a peripheral suburban commuter ring. So, also, the concentric zone model or Borges model is a model to explain how a settlement such as a city will grow. For example, downtown is the business area, or on the outskirts of town might be the suburbs. Their terms are used the just more common method of using concentric zone model. So according to the concentric zone model, there are 5 different zones in any given city. So the persons involved here, it was developed by Ernest W. Borges between 1925. The model was the first to explain why certain groups of people live in certain areas of city. So let's proceed to the anomy theory. Merton's anomy theory is that most people strive to achieve culturally recognized goals. A state of anomy develops when success to these goals is blocked to entire group of people or individuals. The result is a deviant behavior characterized by rebellion, retreat, ritualism, innovations, and conformity. For example, if society does not provide enough jobs to pay a living wage so that people can work to survive, many will turn to criminal methods of earning living. Merton's deviance and crime are a large part a result of anomy, a state of social disorder. So the persons involved here is originally Emil Durkheim, 1997, believed that all society passed through anomy at various points in their development. He also believed there were 3 types of anomy, which is the mechanism anomy, organic anomy, and cultural anomy. Next is the strain theory. And the sociology and criminology strain theory states that social structure within social may pressure citizens to commit a crime. General strain theory is a sociology and criminology theory developed in 1992 by Robert Agnew. Examples of general strain theory are people who use illegal drugs to make themselves feel better, or student assaulting his peers to end harassment they cause. So, the persons involved here is the work of Emil Durkheim. Strain theories have been advanced by Robert King Merton on 1936 and Albert K. Cohen on 1955, Richard Howard Lloyd Owen 1960. And let's proceed to relative deprivation theory. So, what does deprivation means? So, let's proceed. Relative deprivation is the lack of resources to sustain the diet, lifestyle, activities, and amenities that an individual or group are accustomed to, or that widely encourage or approval in the society to which they belong. The theory of relative deprivation is based on the concept that persons may feel deprived of some desirable thing relative to their own past, other persons or groups, or some other social category. Relative deprivations is a feeling that are generally worse than the people you can associate with and compare yourself to. So for example, when you can only afford a hut but your neighbor have big house, so you feel relatively deprived. So the persons involved here is American sociologist Robert Key. General strain theory. So, general strain theory states that strains increase a likelihood of crime, particularly strains that are high magnitude are seen as unjust, are associated of low social control and created some pressure or incentive for criminal copying. Crime is one possible response. So, examples of general strain theory are people who use illegal drugs to make themselves feel better, or student assaulting his peers to end the harassment they caused. And the persons involved here is general strain theory is a theory of criminology developed by Robert Agnew. General strain theory has gained a significant amount of academic attention since being developed in 1992. So next is cultural deviance theory. Cultural deviance theory suggests that conformity to the prevailing cultural norms of lower class society causes crime. The mix of cultures and values created a small society with different ideas of deviance. And those values and ideas were transferred from generation to generation. So examples of formal deviance include robbery, thief, rape, murder, and assault. And formal deviance also refers to a violence of informal social norms, which are norms that have been codified into a law. Persons involved here is Clifford and Henry Mackay. So, delinquent subculture theory. In these terms, criminal or delinquent subculture denotes system of norms, values, or interests that support criminal or delinquent behavior. The many behaviors of specified in law as criminal or delinquent are associated with many criminal and delinquent subcultures. So, persons involved here is Cloward and Ahen presents a theory of juvenile delinquency or builds on the work of Durkheim and Merton, and that focuses on the role of high aspiration and low opportunity. So let's proceed to differential opportunity theory. That is the gist of differential opportunity theory, which is the idea that people from low socioeconomic backgrounds who have few opportunities for success will use many means in disposal to achieve success. The means are generally referred to as subcultures. Crime is only possible if society, certain neighborhoods, or delinquent subcultures provide illegitimate means. A certain kinship cannot be ignored with routine activity approach, where, for example, the presence of the alarm system prevents the opportunity to commit a crime. So the persons involved, a theory of delinquency and delinquent subcultures. It is developed by Richard Cloward and Lloyd Allen in Delinquency and Opportunity in 1960. So let's proceed to drift theory. So when we say drift theory, it recognizes that juvenile delinquents hold conventional values and attitudes. They are aware that their delinquent actions are viewed by society and deviant to nullify these conventional values and beliefs. Juvenile delinquents learn techniques of neutralization. Examples of general strain theory are people who use illegal drugs to make themselves feel better, or a student assaulting his peers to end the harassment they caused. So, the persons involved here by the drift theory was originally proposed by Gresham Sykes and David Matzat to explain how juvenile delinquents can hold both conventional and deviant values and attitudes. So the theory claims that delinquents use techniques of neutralization to rationalize their delinquent and or deviant behaviors. So differential association theory. It explains that people learn to become offenders from their environment through interactions with other individuals, learn the values, attitudes, methods, and motives for criminal behavior. A person becomes a criminal because of frequent criminal patterns. For example, if one is exposed to a repeated criminal scenario, this scenario will eventually rub off on other nearby. The differential association theory can differ in frequency, duration, priority, and intensity. So, the persons involved here is Edwin Sutherland. Containment theory. The theory contends that a series of external social factors and internal qualities effectively insulate certain individuals from criminal involvement even when ecological variables induce the others to engage in crime. On the other hand, according to containment theory, there are also pushes into a crime that are more internal. An example of a push into delinquency or crime might be a low level of frustration tolerance, rebelliousness, and need for gratification, as well as theory. The theory contends that series of external social factors and internal qualities effectively insulate certain individuals from criminal involvement, even when ecological variables induce others to engage in crime. On the other hand, according to containment theory, there are also pushes into crime that are more internal. An example of push into delinquency or crime might be a low level of frustration, tolerance, rebelliousness, and need for gratification as well as one's wants and needs. Persons involved here is a form of control theory proposed by Walter Reckless in the 1940s and 1960s. So, social band theory. Social banding theory is a control theory built upon the assumption that our people inherently self-interest. Therefore, it seeks to explain why some people refrain from crime rather than engage in crime. It is one of the more prominent control theories found in criminological literature. So, for example, because people have formed many relationships with family members and peers over the course of their lives and have unofficially accepted the social conditions and expectations that come with being a part of society, they are unlikely to commit crimes against another person. So the persons involved here was created by Travis Hersky in 1969. So social reaction labeling theory. Social reaction theory or labeling theory focuses on the linguistic social reaction labeling theory. Social reaction theory or labeling theory focuses on the linguistic tendency of majority group to negatively label minority group or those seen as deviant from norms. Social reaction theory claimed that the process of defining and suppressing deviance is important to social solidarity. Labeling theory helps to explain why behavioral is considered negatively deviant to some peoples, groups, and cultures, but positively deviant to others. For example, think about fictional vigilantes like Robin Hood and Batman. Batman is labeled in different ways depending on the public's reaction to his escapes. Diba? So, the persons involved here is the American sociologist Howard S. Baker in his 1963 book Outsiders. So next is primary and secondary deviance. Secondary deviance is deviant behavior that result from being labeled as a deviant by society. This is different from primary deviance, which is deviant behavior that does not have long-term consequences and does not result in the persons committing the act being labeled as a deviant. So for example of primary deviance, teenagers smoking cigarettes and drinking alcohols with their friends is primary deviance. Although teenagers' use of substance goes against social norms, it most unlikely unpush. For example of secondary deviance, if a gang engaged in primary deviant behavior such as acts of violence, dishonesty, or drug addiction, subsequently move to legally deviant or criminal behavior such as murder. This would be the stage of secondary deviance. Limert made other distinction between primary deviance and secondary deviance. So the persons involved is the sociologist Edwin Limert introduced the concept of primary and secondary deviance. So next is economic theories of crime causation. Crime causation. Many social scientists argue that crime is closely related to work, education, and poverty. Unemployment and crime are byproducts or even measured or social exclusion. Thus, the economy theory of crime has focused on the sanction effects and the relationship between the work and a crime. So next is economic model of criminal behavior, basic theory. Basic model. The economic theory of the criminal behavior is an application of the neoclassical theory of demand, formalized by Nobel laureate Gary Becker in 1968. It states potential criminals are economically rational, respond significantly to the deterring incentives by criminal justice system. Economic models of criminal behavior have focused on sanction effects and the relationship between the work and crime. So for example, poor educational attainment may be highly correlated with the incidence of crime. However, this may be also a key determinant of unemployment. So that's it. And the individual and the persons involved here is William Adrian Boger. So next is Karl Marx theory. Marxism is a social, political, and economic theory originated by Karl Marx that focuses on the struggle between capitalist and working class. He believed that this conflict would ultimately lead to a revolution in which the work class would overthrow the capitalist class and seize control of the economy. Marx's also most popular theory with historical materialism, arguing that history is result of material conditions rather than ideas. He also believed that religion, morality, social structures, and other things are rooted in economics. In his later of life was more tolerant or religion. So Friedrich Engels and Wilhelm Bonger's theory. In this book, Bonger argued that the capitalist economic structure can have a detrimental influence on society and can create criminal behavior and allow it to flourish. Bonger refuted each school's claims and noted that the link between crime and economic condition in country was the most compelling argument. Engels and Marx published many articles and books together that attempted to expose the uneven distribution of wealth gained during the Industrial Revolution. Their writings see capitalism as the exploitative system that benefits the owner of land, capital, and means of production more than the workforce. Dutch criminologist Willem Bonger, who believed in a causal link between crime and economic and also social condition. He asserted that crime is social in origin and normal response to prevailing cultural condition. And next, number 5. Next topic would be the biopsychosocial theories of crime causation. Biopsychosocial theories in criminology and psychology is a multidisciplinary perspective that attempts to understand criminal behavior. So by considering the interactions between the biological, genetics, harmonies, physiology, brain structure, functioning, psychological and sociological factors, biopsychosocial model of crime causation. The biopsychosocial model is a general model positing that biological, psychological, socio-economical, socio-environmental, and cultural factors all play a significant role in health and disease. So the persons involved here is George Engel in 1977. Next is moral insanity and criminal responsibility. So when we say moral insanity, it referred to a type of mental disorder consisting of abnormal emotions and behaviors in the apparent absence of intellectual impairments, delusions, or hallucinations. It was an accepted diagnosis in Europe and America through the second half of the 19th century. So the term criminal responsibility, it refers to a person's ability to understand his or her conduct at the time of a crime is when the time crime is committed. So the persons involved is Daniel C.'s. So next is premenstrual syndrome. Premenstrual syndrome is a combination of symptoms that many women get about a week or two before their period. Most women, over 90%, say that they get some premenstrual symptoms such as bloating, headaches, and moodiness. The most common mood-related symptoms are irritability, depression, crying, oversensitivity, and mood swings. The most common of physical symptoms are fatigue, bloating, breast tenderness, acne, flare-ups, and appetite changes with food cravings. So the persons involved here is Robert T. Frank. Next is the battered child syndrome. So when we say battered child syndrome, it is defined as the collection of injuries sustained by a child as a result of repeated mistreatment or beating. If a child's injuries indicate intentionally trauma or appear to be more severe than could reasonably be expected to result from an accident, battered child syndrome should be suspected. A disease in which children are physically abused. The battered child syndrome is a form of child abuse. Not until the 19th century were children granted the same legal status as domesticated animals or regard to protections against cruelty and or neglect. Common trigger events that may occur before assaults include incessant crying or wailing for infants or children perceives excessive fussiness of an infant or child. A toddler's failed toilet training, exaggerated perceptions of acts of disobedience by a child. So the persons involved here is Dr. C. Henry Kempe and his colleagues were the first to recognize the identify and child abuse and neglect in defining paper the battered child of syndrome. Battered woman syndrome. So battered woman syndrome or battered person syndrome is a psychological condition that can be developed when a person's experience abuse, usually at the hands of the intimate partner. People who find themselves in an abusive relationship often do not feel safe or happy. Relationship may be heterosexual or same-sex. Walker cycle theory of violence. The Walker cycle theory of violence in 1979 to 2000 is a tension reduction theory that states that there are three distinct phases associated with a recurring battering cycle: tension building, the acute battering incident, and the loving contribution. So, the persons involved here is psychotherapist Lenore Walker developed the concept of battered woman syndrome in the late 1970s. She wanted to describe the unique patterns of behavior and emotions that can be developed when a person experiences abuse and as they try to find ways to survive the situation. So next is postpartum stress syndrome and postpartum psychosis. Post-traumatic stress disorder is a condition that presents similar symptoms as either form of PSTD when a woman experiences real or perceived traumas before or during after childbirth, result in chronic and terrifying symptoms. Postpartum psychosis, a very serious mental illness that can affect a new mother. The episode of psychosis usually begins within 1 to 3 months of delivery. So the persons involved here is Karen Clayman. And so let's proceed to political sociological conflict theories of crime causation. It is an alternative conception of political theories of crime causation is that they are characterized by their emphasis and social conflict and power relationships. And so far as the criminal justice system is seen as an instrument of political control or repression of politizations of all crime is implied. Marxist criminology. Marxist criminology is one of the schools of criminology. As in the conflict criminology, it focuses on why things change, identifying the distributive forces in industrialized societies and describing how society are divided by power, wealth, prestige, and the perceptions of the world. So the persons involved is Karl Marx. Next is conflict theory. A theory that a society in a state of perpetual conflict because of competition of limited resources. Conflict theory holds that social order is maintained by dominations and power rather than by consensus of conformity. So, for example, conflict theory describes the relationship between employers and employees as one of the conflict in which the employees wish to pay a little possible for the employees' labor, while the employees wish to maximize their wages. So these are the real-life examples of conflict theory. Occupy Wall Street, part of the backlash following the 2000 economic crisis. Occupy Wall Street was a 2-month political protest on Wall Street, New York. The education system, the criminal justice system. So the persons involved here is Karl Marx. So let's proceed to social reality of crime. Under the theory of the social reality of crime, crime is held to be a legal definition of human conduct created by agents of the dominant class and politically organized society. Definitions of crime are in turn applied by the class that has the power of shape enforcement and administrations of criminal law. So the persons involved here is Richard Queney. Left realism. So when we say left realism, it is just one political ideology that focuses on the causes of crime and divides. Left realistic believe that living a capitalistic society, as in a society where private entities control trade and industry, instead of the state, is the main cause for crime. So example, people who are included from being consumers in a capitalist society sometimes revert to criminal actions, according to left realist. So the persons involved here is Jack Young and John Leah, Roger Matthews, and Richard Kinsey. So next is postmodern theory. Postmodernism is associated with relativism and a focus on ideology and the maintenance of economic and political power. Postmodernists are general skeptical of explanation which claim to be valid for all groups, cultures, traditions, or races and describe truth as relative. Postmodernism relies on critical theory which considers the effects of ideology, society, and history on culture. Postmodernism and critical theory commonly criticize universalist ideas of objective reality, morality, truth, human nature, and reasons, language, and also social progress. So the persons involved here is theorist Jacques Derrida on 1930-2004. So next, constitutive theory. So constitutive theory states that recognition of an entity is a state is not automatic, and a state is only a state when it is recognized as such, and other states have considerable discretion to recognize or not. Moreover, only upon recognition by those other states does the new state exist, at least in a legal sense. The persons involved here is Edmund Husserl in 1990s. Conservatism and liberalism theory. Conservatism is a type of political belief that supports emphasis on traditions and relies on the individual to maintain society. The term is associated with right-wing politics. It's been used to describe a wide range of views. So liberalism is a political and moral philosophy based on liberty, consistent of the governed, and equality before the law. So the persons involved here is philosopher John Locke, Edmund Burke, 1927 and 1997. So let's proceed to radicalism. In political science, the term radicalism is a belief that society needs to be changed and that these changes are only possible through revolutionary means. The most people think of left-wing politics when they use the noun radicalism, although people on both ends of the spectrum can be described as radical. Radical theorists tend to view criminal law as an instrument by which the powerful and affluent coerce and pour into patterns of behavior that preserves the status quo. On one such view, the so-called peacemaking theory is based on the premise that violence creates violence. So the persons involved here is Jeremy Bentham. Next is identity fusion theory. Identity fusion theory posits that strongly fused individuals feel kin-like bonds with other group members, even ones with whom they may had little or no contact. Several studies have gathered empirical support for the relations ties principle. For example, the verbal measure of identity fusion taps feelings of reciprocal strength between the individual and the group. So, I am strong because of my group. I would do more for the group than any other group members would do, as well as feelings of oneness with the group. So, I am the one with my group. So, my group is me. So, persons involved is Tajfel and his colleagues. And that would be all. Thank you.